Welcome to the Love, Law, and Life Makeover Podcast, a go-to for hope, faith, and joy in changing your life. I'm Neil Presley Cox, lawyer, speaker, and author of Hope Lines. I have an easy-to-find website, neilpresleycox.com. You can't miss it. And a nice welcome for my presenter and co-host, Kelsey Gibbs.
So, good news happened. We figured out a name for our podcast.
What is it?
Love, Law, if I can say it correctly, Love, Law, and Life Makeover. Which I feel like actually completely encompasses.
Anna's the love, I'm the law, and together we're the life makeover.
I love it. It's perfect. That's perfect. I'm so excited to bring Anna on more often here. She's such a gem. I loved last week. That was so fun. So this week we're going to be talking about leaving your spouse, a marriage spiraling downward. And just, I guess, cutting to the chase. I read this chapter and it was very sad. Actually, I guess we're going to start there. Neil, do you mind just recapping this story for us?
It is really sad. You've got a husband who is fighting with his wife. They've got a little girl, and he's not coming home after work. He's doing what he wants, going to a bar, flirting with other women, and heading in a direction that's not going to end well. She retaliates and spends some time with a guy, and he's got his eye on other ladies, and we can see where it ends, and the story just sort of ends before it really ends, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like it sounds like, I think later on in the applications section, you talk about how they're kind of like in a trap. Like they're like in their marriage is, right? Because he's out drinking late at night, flirting with the waitresses, or the one waitress in the story, right?
Right.
And then she ends up going on a trip, and there's a man who obviously was on the trip as well, and they end up having an argument, and she kind of throws it back in his face, like, how does it feel to be on the other side of the coin, right? So what is it, I guess, how do you think marriages get to that place? Like, what is it that like gets them entrapped in that weird cycle of, I mean, there was no infidelity exactly in the story, but it does seem like there's like some major problems going on.
I believe that all of us get trapped. As individuals, we get trapped, and in relationships, we get trapped. And those traps come from competing desires. We human beings have wants and have ego and have a nature that tries to get things selfishly for ourselves. And we also have better angels in our nature, and there's all this competition between those, and therein lies the conflict. And so in a relationship context, you get into a trap where you're having the same argument constantly, you're having the same conversation, and there's no progress. It's like you're in a bubble and you can't get out of the bubble and rise above it. You're stuck. And so you're pursuing what you want, and the other person in the relationship is pursuing what he or she wants. And it's just this constant miss and sort of a dance of argument where each person is trying to snatch what happiness they can from the relationship.
Yeah.
There's a program I watch with my wife called iMarriage, and it's really a great program. I highly recommend it. Andy Stanley is a pastor who put it together.
Oh, I know who it is.
He's really wonderful. really wonderful. And this program, each person goes into a marriage or relationship as an I, as a me, and they're trying to get what they can out of the whole. And so two people are both pulling stuff out, trying to get what they want because that's what they think will make them happy. And instead, what we do in the iMarriage context is that we bring this other entity, if you will, into the mix. I call this entity God. And with God's aid, our selfish desires recede and we start putting in and filling up the marriage. So it becomes a we marriage as opposed to an I marriage. So I think it's a beautiful concept. And I think it also kind of touches on the nature of the problem, which is human selfishness. And it is a trap. The story is about two people that are caught in a trap.
And it's not, it's super helpful to avoid getting into the trap, but there are ways out of it if you do happen to get into it, right?
That's right. But it's a little tricky because I don't believe, in the first place, a lot of people that are trapped, or relationship people that are trapped in a relationship, the first thing is they don't realize they're trapped. When I was trapped by alcoholism and marijuana addiction, I didn't always see it as a trap. I saw it as an answer to my stress. So if you don't see that you're trapped, then you're not going to look for a way out. But if you do recognize that you're in a sort of a trap, you need help. In this context, your relationship needs help. Then I believe that the only kind of help that can really assist us humans in our human problems is help from a higher power, as something outside of us. Like I was saying, we have the same conversation when we're arguing with our spouse, and it just goes in a circle and it's ugly and it doesn't change and things get worse and worse. So we invite God in and we get help from a higher power. And so suddenly it's like fresh air is coming into this closed bubble, and we can suddenly see that we're not trapped, and we can see that there are answers, and the frustration starts to melt away. But only when we invite outside help in.
Does this happen a lot? Like in your, like, do you notice these kinds of things happening a lot in your profession? Like specifically with practicing law in the Valley?
I see it all the time in my profession, but I see it all the time in my friendships and my personal life. I have a theory that of all the people in a relationship with a significant other, call it romance relationship, whatever you want to call it, about a good third of people are actively cheating. And I don't mean just thinking about cheating, but actively cheating. Or they're on the edge of a breakup for whatever reason. They're deeply unhappy. And then you've got about maybe another 6 that are in the somewhat unhappy department. They're not really a happy couple, but they're plodding along. Then you've got about maybe another third that are in the slightly happy camp. They're doing okay. They could work on things and they have a risk of falling into the slightly unhappy very easily, but they're doing okay. They're not real happy, but they're not on the edge of breaking up. And then you've got a 6th or even less of people that I would say are very happy in their relationship. They're actually compatible and working together. And when there is a problem, they meet it honestly and talk, and they don't start keeping secrets and let resentment start festering and start burning the bridges, so that there's only a narrow pathway between them, but they keep the bridge wide and healthy.
I love it. Yeah. that definitely I think you're right. Being compatible as well as having that open communication is super helpful. But yeah, if you're finding that struggle of, because I see that all the time. Like, I mean, I have, siblings, friends, all that, right? And I'll just see them, and it's almost like they're really, really trying to communicate, but it ends up like their whole relationship is them talking in a circle about their problems. And so open communication is great, but I think you're right. Like, it's a lot of, if you have resentment stuck inside of you, you'll end up having the same conversation over and over. And you could have that for literally years.
Right.
And you're not solving anything. Nothing's
Right.
happening.
And sort of subtly know that it's just something is just ridiculously wrong.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't know what to do.
And that's where, like, you're right. Like, tapping into God, going to a counselor, trying to find that outside help.
Outside.
Exactly. Can't, because there's something stuck within you. And so there has to be, like, you might not be able to figure out how to get unstuck by yourself, especially, I mean, even scientifically, they talk about like vibration and frequency, and like, you can't solve what they say. You can't solve a problem with the same frequency that got you stuck.
Right.
It has to be something bigger than that. So either you have to raise your frequency, you have to tap into God, you got to find a counselor, something that brings you up enough to be able to solve that problem.
Right. So true, Kelsey. So true. And I've heard it said as you can't solve your thinking problem, you can't solve it with a broken tool. Can't solve what's broken with a broken tool.
Which is your mind. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I'm going to read part of the poem that I have written in this section of the book. My right to be happy explodes across the cerebral cortex, noisy and dominating. I can no longer hear the soft heartbeat of hearth and family. The upcoming hurt to children and spouse, ignored. It's so sad. This man has a family. He's got a daughter. He's got a little girl, and he's so stuck, and she's so stuck that they're starting to look toward other people, and it's just heartbreaking. What adults do when they're just being adults and in relationships and out and break up and together and cheat and whatever. It is what it is. I hate that saying, but I use it a lot. But when you've got a child, a family, that's a different world, a different thing. And so that's when it becomes very heartbreaking, more so than the heartbreak of just a breakup, infidelity. That's heartbreaking for an individual. But with a child in the mix, it's a different kind of a world. The other thing is that I think that it's just like I was saying, the noise of your family, that's something in your heart is talking about your family, saying, I've got to do something for my family, or this is right. But it's a quiet whisper. And that brain, that ego, that want, the way I wanted marijuana overrode when I was doing it actively. It overrode the whispers I was getting in my heart about my family and what was wrong. And so when somebody wants to cheat and feels like they're not getting what they want at home, that want is a loud roar. It's an airline, and your family, and well, I shouldn't do this, is just a whisper in the heart. And so that's very dangerous when you get to the point that airline is right next to you and you can hear the noise of it. You're pretty far along. And so one of the purposes of my story was that the ending starts before it really starts. When you start thinking about someone else, you've started down the road. The Bible talks about that. That's why Jesus was saying cheating starts with a thought about being with another person, even before you've actually taken the physical step. And so people want to say, oh no, it's okay that I'm doing that. And And it's not a matter of one person judging what another's doing. It's simply a matter of you start down a path. You start down a path, and the further down the path you go, the more you get trapped. It's like a net. When something struggles against a net, the net just gets more entangled and draws tighter. And that's what a path is. So it's not a matter of judging somebody just for having a thought, but every time somebody cheats, it began with thinking about somebody else and then thinking about them some more. And pretty soon it got louder.
Yeah, because even Walt Disney said, what did he say? It was if you can dream it, you can create it, you can make it, you can build it, right?
Right.
And like that, if you will naturally go in the direction of your most dominant thought. So if and going back to like your kids, like if your kids are a part of your legacy, like they're a huge part of your legacy and what you're leaving behind in this world. And being able to pour into them and showing them what a good, healthy relationship is and how to overcome struggles, like, thinking about what it is that you're going, that's like, and that, I think at the end of it, if you're not planning where you're gonna go, you're gonna just give on to whatever impulse your mind and society and your experience has for you, right? So it's like what you said right here. In the book, it says, make a decision to do your part right now to stop the cycle of inflicting hurts on each other. You will find that there is power and grace in such a choice. And it's right there, like, hey, harness yourself, figure out where you're going and do that. And then the other distractions, you can have those thoughts, but they're not going to have that power over you because you know where you're going. You've got a direction. I love that. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, that's very good. We were talking about pursuing happiness before we started the podcast, Kelsey. And one of the things we were talking about is that the more you try to chase happiness and grab happiness, the more it eludes you, like jelly that just, you can't hold it. But if you focus on doing what you believe to be the right things, and I think personally that we need some outside help with knowing what the right things are. I don't like to give humans too much room on that one. But when we start doing the right things and get clean and right with God, with our Heavenly Father, and just take those steps one step at a time, not overnight, but one step at a time, use the 5% rule, then a collateral thing starts happening and we don't even realize it at first. We start getting happy. What a shocker.
What a shocker. Yeah, just like what you were saying, like cleaning out, you're like doing good, it actually makes you feel good, right? Like doing good makes you feel good. Going for that, going for like the shortcut of it, for lack of a better analogy, just like, oh, I'm gonna drink or I'm gonna smoke, or even smoking cigarettes and getting that dopamine hit from that real quick, right? Like doing good will make you feel, I like that. Okay.
But we can't do that without help, in my opinion, from a higher power, because the first thing that I would think of if left to my own thinking in okay, I'll just start doing good, is, well, she better recognize that I'm doing good and start rewarding me in about 2 days, or this good stuff's gonna stop. So it's not doing good because that's what I'm supposed to do in terms of my relationship with my higher power. My brain says do good because I'll get certain carrots from other people.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So we need help to do good. Otherwise, we do good for an ulterior motive. We're not really just trying to better ourselves as a human being and get clean.
Yeah, definitely.
Tricky deal.
I know.
Being a person ain't easy.
It's so true. You're right. I never thought of it that way. Just being alive is not easy, right?
You wake up squirming and kicking and crying and like, what in the world am I on this strange place for? Yeah.
Yeah, and then trying to figure it all out. And that's what we're all doing, right? We're all just trying to figure it out as we go.
Well, if you
But
got good
thankfully-
parents, it's not so bad in the beginning and everything's taken care of. You don't have to make any decisions. Suddenly you get thrown out into the adult world and nothing makes sense.
Oh man, it's a tough world out there, y'all. Tread lightly. Get help as you need it.
Yeah.
There are lifelines.
I get help all the time. I need it. Doesn't matter how old I get,
Mhm.
how much I study, I still need day-to-day help.
So we got, for help, we got iMarriage that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We got finding outside resources like counseling, tapping into a higher power. I think you had in here, there's like some small things you can do too, as far as like, scheduling a date, making your spouse a priority, right?
Yeah, going to a new place with your spouse, with your partner, going to a new place and just making it for fun, no kids, and a sort of a start over, that can be a real good thing. And then slowing down on the relationship front. Jumping out of a marriage or jumping out of a relationship into another one quickly is, it's usually leads to some tough deals.
Yeah. Before we close, I did have one more question. Do you mind explaining, because you mentioned the 5% rule a couple times, do you mind kind of explaining that?
Yeah, for me, when I have a problem, and my problems always stem from me, although I usually at first think it's somebody else's fault. When I have a
Yeah.
problem, the problem, something that's really bothering me, always appears to be this huge, insurmountable mountain or giant wall right in front of me. And so it feels very overwhelming. And I start thinking, I can't change myself. I've been this way. And I've tried to change this before, and it's impossible. So there's a hopelessness that sets in with a problem. The 5% rule simply says, don't try to take on the whole mountain. Just pick one little thing today that you can do and say that's good enough, and do that. And then tomorrow, maybe do that plus one more little thing. Pretty soon you'll realize that that giant wall in front of you is starting to crumble. And so, and it may be that you realize it wasn't a wall at all, but simply an opportunity. Instead of just being banged up against it and hurt and frustrated.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. That was really good. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we close?
No, I believe that our wants, our ego and our wants are a very powerful force that we cannot contain on our own, despite the self-delusion that we can. And that's why we've got to get help from some outside source.
Awesome. And yeah, if you don't have a copy of this book, Hope Lines, it is available on Amazon. You can get it in hardback, paperback. Where I'm trying to get Neil to get a audio book version of it. So we're still looking into that.
We'll get there.
That's yeah. Next week we'll be talking about baby mamas and baby daddies. So definitely tune into that. If you know of anyone in that situation, if you are in that situation, you care about people in that situation. Yeah, definitely tune into that. But thanks for joining us here at Love, Law, and Life Makeover. Thanks, Neil, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. You helped me work on a makeover today for myself.
Yeah, starting the week right.